Yo, 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 what is going on, my beautiful brothers and sisters? This is Jay Phoenix coming at you with another video. Just going to do a little bit of a little astrology update since I haven't done one in a little bit. I have been making videos on Instagram, doing like little reels, like daily and stuff, but the past couple of days I haven't done any. So I wanted to make sure I just catch up and did a video today. Just do a little bit of a recap of what we've been going through and kind of like a little preview of what's to come. So, trusting that everyone's having a wonderful day. You know, it is the last full day of the sun in Taurus because by tomorrow in the afternoon here on the East Coast, we will see that sun make its way into Gemini by around 3:20ish, I would say p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will see that sun ingress into Gemini, right? So, but as of right now, of course, as you can see, we do have the sun here at 28 degrees coming off of that major conjunction to Uranus. We're still kind of feeling that energy, but we are coming off of that conjunction. And this was, of course, the last time that the sun will conjunct Uranus in our lifetime, unless you're like, like below the age of 10 potentially, and more than likely you're not watching this video. So if you are watching this video and you're 10 years old, then kudos to you. But obviously most of you guys are watching this. The next time that we even see this transit will be 80 plus years from now. So we will have been moved on, unless they come up with some sort of interesting technology to extend human life, which I think I think that's definitely possible, but I think it'll have moral implications if it doesn't already, but once it becomes much more of a larger conversation in our society about the use of life extending medicines and technologies. Not that we don't already have those, because we definitely do, but beyond, the general, lifespan of humanity right now. Because I think generally the oldest people, as of late, get up to like the 120s generally. But we may eventually see, of course, technologies allow us to get to the ages of like 150, 200 and shit like that, right? So, but, like I said, this Sun-Uranus conjunction was definitely a huge one. Like I said, Uranus is a disruptor. It's all about electricity. It's all about the weather. And of course, with the sun, there's been a lot of solar activity as well. So it makes sense that when the sun met with Uranus here, the increase the solar activity. And like I said, this is also about electricity. And this is Taurus as well. And one thing that a lot of people don't know about Taurus is that Taurus has rulership outside of Venus. In fact, the modern ruler of Taurus is actually the Earth. But generally, you don't see the Earth here, right? But the Earth is always opposite that of the Sun. Always opposite that of the Sun. So, right now, we have the Earth at 28 degrees of Scorpio, right? So, with Uranus being, and this is the reason why Uranus, the ruler of the sky god, the ruler of the heavens in many ways, why he falls in Taurus, because this is the Earth. He's grounded, right? And if you know even just a little bit of the lore behind Uranus and how he essentially got his genitals cut off and how it pretty much zapped him of his energy and how it grounded him in a sense, it makes even more sense, with this energy. So Uranus doesn't like to be in Taurus, right? And if you think about Uranus being electricity and how the ground just absorbs that electricity, and then they really can't really do much of anything, right? It grounds that energy out. So, but Taurus also rules many other things. Obviously it rules the throat, right? It rules the throat chakra. I also find that Taurus rules the toroidal field. Now, what is the toroidal field? The toroidal field is our own, like, just like how the Earth has its own, magnetic sphere around it that protects it, so do we. We also have a toroidal field, just like the Earth does. So, and I will show you this, and I think there's a reason why it's called Taurus. I think you have to look at all these things. You have to look at the names You have to look at the glyphs, because even if we look at, you have to look at all this stuff. You can't just be one-dimensional with this, right? So if I just share my screen with you guys real fast, I'll do that. So like this right here is the toroidal field. So that which you put out comes back in. And of course, this looks very similar to the magnetic, electromagnetic fields that are around the Earth, right? So with Uranus being in Taurus, and Taurus rules the electromagnetic field around our bodies in many ways, our physical bodies, right? And Uranus is a disruptor. This field in many ways is being disrupted. So if over the last few days you have been feeling strange impulses within your body more than usual, maybe twitching. I've had a lot of twitching in my lip, which, yeah, could be due to stress and lack of minerals. But if you've been getting increased headaches over this time period, if you've just been feeling odd sensations within your body, it's probably the fact that the sun met with Uranus in Taurus. All of our toroidal fields are being, I wouldn't say tampered with, although I do feel like they are being tampered with, but they're certainly being affected, because just like the Earth has a Taurus, a magnetic field that protects it, right? We too have this as well. As above, so below. We have a north and a south pole, if you will, and we have this field around us. That which you put out comes back in. So, with Uranus being in Taurus, is there any, coincidence that there's been such a focus on solar activity, that there's been such a focus on the shifting of the poles, that there's been a focus on all of these blackouts that we've been having, and all these different things with electrical instruments? There's much more talk about these sort of things. The aurora borealis, how we're being able to see it further and further south, more than usual, being seen as far south as, I'm here in Georgia, and it's been seen up in North Georgia. It's really south. I think I've even heard that it's been seen further south than that even. And so this is not normal stuff. And like I said, Uranus is a disruptor. So, this is the last time that we're going to see this in all of our lifetimes, this conjunction. We also had a bunch of other kind of weird stuff that happened, like, what was it, this whole thing, I don't know if y'all saw about this Mexican Navy sail ship hit the Brooklyn Bridge over the weekend. Apparently, actually, I didn't even know that, apparently 2 crew members were killed during this. Now, this is just kind of wild. What's interesting about this naval ship is that it kind of looks a little old school, right? And it just goes under the ship. And it's weird, too, because I watched the video of this, and I'm like, there's no way that thing's going to get under there. Did they really think it was going to? But they kept going anyways. And they had, like, these 3 large pillars, and they all got bent over. There was also, like, some sort of explosion at, like, in a fertility clinic. So, yeah, a lot of disruptions over the weekend with that Sun-Uranus conjunction. And, of course, like I said, this is all about Taurus. And, yeah, there's a lot of different things. Like, I've talked about the toroidal field. Or I've talked about the throat chakra, right? So maybe there's been some shocking conversations that might have been had this weekend, We could also talk about just physical reality in and of itself. We could talk about, of course, just money. A lot of people say, Taurus is about money, It's also about what you truly value, right? It's also about self-worth. So Uranus was shaking up all that stuff too. That's just kind of crazy, though. I didn't know that 2 people actually had died. And I honestly don't know how they thought that they were going to get under that bridge. I really don't. I guess they just misinterpreted how low the bridge was. And this maybe could be sort of like an example of kind of where we're going right now. How we may perceive something and think that we can kind of just scoot by and get under it, but then kind of takes your head off, This also can be dealing with the fact that, and that's the funny thing about it too, because we have Neptune in Aries, and Aries does rule the head, and Neptune is about our perceptions. So it's like this whole idea that we thought that we can perceive and we can get under this thing, and then our head gets taken off. The head got taken off of this ship, essentially. Very sad moment. Very sad moment, indeed. But it just kind of goes to show, just the kind of energy that we're in right now. Hold on, let's see. Yeah, let's bring it back to the chart, right? So we do have this moon here in Aquarius, and it's getting ready to create that third quarter square, which I think is interesting. That's literally happening on the 29th degree. So we get more 29 energy. So that's always going to provide some edge, right? So we're going to see the moon squaring the sun here at 29 degrees. So Tuesday is going to start off with a bang and very, very edgy. And we have Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces getting ready to shift into Aries. So talk about feeling like something new is going to be born, and something's like it. Talk about like just wanting things to move. I think that's the other thing about Uranus that this Uranus and Taurus energy that we have to think about is that since Uranus is a disruptor and Taurus is the most stubborn sign, Uranus is breaking up a lot of the most stuck and stubborn energy in our human consciousness over the last 84 years. It's breaking it all up. So a lot of those customs and values are being reshaped, reformed, and disrupted right now. And you're seeing people cling to the old in many ways too. Ironically, people on both sides of the political spectrums clinging to the old ways, even though they feel like one might be moving forward and one might be moving backwards. But there's a lot of shakeups that are happening here. But like I said, we begin that Tuesday off very edgy. 29 degree square of the moon to this sun. And then we do have Saturn, which will be in sextile to it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's like all fun and games. Sextiles, yeah, can be positive. But this is definitely going to be testing our spiritual integrity. I've been talking about this. I've been saying it a lot about how Saturn and Pisces is testing our spiritual integrity. Especially because when it comes into Aries, it's going to force a lot of people to grow up. That's the ironic thing about the Saturn and Pisces is that it is actually revealing in many ways where you have refused to grow up and where you have decided to run to, I guess, that safe space or try to escape under the covers, if you will, and not grow up and face the things that you have to face. Because when Saturn comes into Aries, there is no choice. You have to grow up. Anybody that has Saturn in Aries, remember Saturn falls in Aries. Anybody that has Saturn in Aries had to grow up fast in some aspect. Maybe they had a lot of siblings and they were the eldest sibling and had to take care of their siblings. There's always some weird issue with the parents with Saturn and Aries, all right? Always some weird issue with that. Where it's like their parents are more childlike or childish. Saturn and Aries, their parents are usually very childish, right? So they almost have to be the adult. They almost have to be the parent. So this is going to force everybody to grow up in a sense. And a lot of people aren't going to want to do that. And a lot of people aren't going to like that. But that's what we're heading to. That's exactly where we are heading to right now. So Tuesday's going to be a very interesting day. Of course, the moon's going to move into Pisces, of course, bring a little bit more of this watery energy. But then, of course, we'll see as the day progresses, we will see that sun shift into Gemini. And this is going to be, in many ways, kind of like a precursor to the Uranus when it comes into Gemini. And you got to remember, too, the other thing about the sun and Uranus is that the sun rules Leo, Uranus rules Aquarius. So they are opposites. You got to understand that, too. That's the weird thing about it. They are opposites, and they just came together. The biggest energy in our solar system, the sun, met up with Uranus here in Taurus. Taurus ruled by the Earth, right? Of course, at this point, you will see that the Earth will shift into Sagittarius at 0 degrees, right? So we'll probably see an upkick over the next 30 days about Sagittarian-like things. We'll probably see a lot of stuff happening with religion and those sort of things kind of being upkicked. But the Sun in Gemini is going to start a lot of different conversations, especially as that Sun gets closer to that Jupiter. And that's going to be the interesting thing about it, is that Jupiter is going to get a little bit of power with this, but it's not going to be like... It's interesting because Jupiter wants to be the Sun. That's something that people don't talk about. Jupiter wants to be the Sun. Jupiter desperately wants to be the Sun. This is why Sagittariuses love hanging around Leos, because they secretly really want to be Leo. They're both fire signs, right? So they kind of get things from that angle. But Jupiter desperately wants to be the Sun because it's on its way to being a Sun, but it's not quite there yet, right? It's not quite there yet. So Jupiter, when it comes to all of the other planets, can kind of act all big and mighty, whatever like that. Although Mercury doesn't really give a crap about that. Mercury just cares about the facts. It's opposite sign. The sign that's in, of course, Mercury rules. And Mercury is here in Taurus, right? So Mercury is dispositing this Jupiter. And Mercury in Taurus is definitely much more so about what's real, what's facts, what's concrete, in Taurus here. Now that the Sun meets up with Jupiter and Mercury's not dispositing both of these energies, it's like I said, Jupiter wants to be the center of attention, but it's not. It wants to be the center of attention, but it's not. So that's the thing about Sag. Sag kind of wants to be the center of attention, but it's not. It's meant to be more of a teacher, if anything. And a teacher after going on the adventure and gaining the wisdom of being on said adventure, right? But that's an interesting thing about it, is that with this Jupiter and Gemini, they definitely want to be the center of the conversation too. So with the Sun coming here and now illuminating this spot, and we can even just look, we'll look at the essential dignities. Because you can see Jupiter's at a -5, right? Whereas the Sun's at a +3, Saturn's at a +2. So we can see that Jupiter is not entirely strong right now, right? It's not super strong. And like I said, even though, like I said, we have the Saturn Sun sextile beforehand, which is nice, and even the Moon squaring it, so it's okay, right? It's not super strong. So I think this is about seeing the silver linings and things and seeing the positives and things. Is that it doesn't always have to be super negative just because it's not going exactly the way that we want or exactly the way that we perceive it to be. Well, it's at +0 at that point. I mean, we gotta look, actually. I wonder if I can, let me go back, actually, and just show the moment of the square, right? So, if we go back to the square, yeah, it's +1. So actually, the Moon actually loses some energy after the square, which is kind of interesting. It's at +1. But then we look at when that Sun comes into Gemini, what happens to Jupiter? What happens to him? Wow, would you look at that? There's a lot of things. You saw how fast those things shifted. Sun goes to +1, Moon goes to +0, Jupiter goes to -4, so it only gains a point. It only gains a point. But look at this, Mercury and Venus go -5 and -10 respectively. Whereas before that had happened, right, if we go back, like literally just an hour difference, we see that there were -2 and -5 respectively. Now, why is that? Well, the Sun is no longer in the house that Venus rules. So she's not getting that power, right? She's not getting that power. Now, the sun goes into the house that Mercury does rule, which is interesting. Well, why? So why does Mercury lose a little bit of its juice? Probably because Mercury really wants to be where the sun is, right? It's crazy how much an hour difference makes. He goes to -5. Yeah, so I mean, he loses a little bit. Venus loses a lot. So that's the weird thing about this. So, like, you will notice a shift in the middle of the day, right? When the sun shifts into Gemini, you will notice this shift. Saturn's going to kind of remain the same. The sun's going to kind of remain the same. The moon's going to kind of remain the same. Mars is going to kind of remain the same. Jupiter's going to kind of remain the same, although it's going to gain just a little bit of help. So there is a moment of hope here. But at the same time, when it comes to the way that we kind of cognitively think of things, try to put things together, and then Venus, the way that we're receiving things, takes a major hit. It goes -10. It takes a major hit, right? So, and it's in Aries. So that's the thing. Venus does not like to be in Aries. Much rather be in Libra, where it finds its home, right? So I would definitely say just to kind of be wary of that aspect of your consciousness, the Venus aspect of your consciousness, when it comes to how we receive our reality. Because there could be something that happens throughout the day, then at this point, I can definitely see people just kind of like lose it a little bit. Because then they're going to claim that things are unfair, because Venus does rule Libra, which does deal with balancing things out in fairness. But like I said, Jupiter does gain a little bit of strength, right? It's -4. It gains a little bit of strength. Nothing too crazy, but it gains a little bit of strength, right? But the cool thing is like let's just look at this, right? As we like just go forward, as we go forward in the days and stuff, right? So May 24th, of course, we are still, Saturn is almost coming into Pisces. It's not quite there. It's +2. We got the +4 where the moon has moved now into Taurus, right? Still -10, still -5. The moon's now at +4. The sun's actually at the moon's at +5. The sun is at +4, right? Jupiter's still at -4. Bam, now Mercury gets some power because it comes into its home. So, I think things will start to kind of make sense in about a week when Mercury actually comes home and it feels a lot better, right? Venus also gets a little bit better because it goes to -4 instead of -10, so it actually gains some. But we will see that, Saturn just went into Aries, and now it is in its fall, and it goes to -1, right? And that moon's going to be at -5. So going into the new moon, we may not necessarily be feeling the best, right? But then for like the actual new moon itself, which is going to be happening at 6 degrees, excuse me, right? We'll see Mercury at +10, the sun at +1. That moon's going to be at -5. We got Mars at +0, -4, -4, -9. Saturn's going to be at -9. It's going to hurt. This is definitely a growing up moment. So I think once Monday comes, it's going to be that moment where it's like we have to kind of just, I think it's about facing facts, facing the reality of how everything is shifting. Of course, that moon is also out of bounds, so we're going to have an out of bounds new moon because 26 north in declination, right? So an out of bound new moon at 6 degrees with a Saturn that is very much so fallen, a moon that's not really feeling the best. At least Mercury is doing decent. But Mercury is mutable air, so this is all about adaptability. This is all about maneuverability. Like, what's your maneuverability? You have to be able to adjust and be elastic and this is about agility. This is about your mental agility, right? Do you have the ability to kind of move and bounce, like when new information comes in, are you just like stuck, or are you able to kind of use that mental agility so you don't allow those thoughts to just trap you and hold you in a reality that prevents you from moving forward spiritually, right? And that's really what this is going to be about. So, and I kind of want to just, so oops, sorry about that. Kind of want to just I want to just kind of continue to move this forward so we can kind of just look at that Jupiter. You see, it's starting to get a little bit of power as the sun gets closer. It's -2, right? -2, -3. So, and I think it just depends upon, what's with it, right? It's also getting closer to Cancer, right? By the time that the sun and Jupiter is going to be right here at that last degree, it goes back to -5. You see how erratic Jupiter is? It's kind of wild how erratic Jupiter is. But then, of course, Jupiter does go into Cancer before the sun even conjuncts it, and then it'll be at +4, right? So I think, by the time June comes around, I think people will start to feel like this energy really is moving forward. But it really has already started. Uranus, you gotta understand that the Sun and Uranus conjunction was just the beginning. That was just that. It wasn't even just the beginning. That was, if anything, that was more of like, you know, like a nodule or a point, because a lot of things have been happening up to it. Whenever it comes to transits, you want to look at the energy leading up to the actual transit itself, because that's usually the big pop. There's always something percolating underneath. It's like if you plant a seed, right? I guess the actual transit itself is that moment where you see the first sapling, right? But there's also everything that happened before that. The roots growing and burrowing in more into the ground and stuff. We always like to look at the exact aspect of something, but really that's just the result of the energy that's already been building up, right? So that's why you look over like the last several weeks of the sun building up to this Uranus, and look at your life and look at what's happened. Look at what disruptions have maybe happened in your life when it comes to self-worth, self-value, money, maybe your toroidal field, maybe your energetic field, electricity and stuff like that, Look at all of that. Look at the disruptions that have been happening. And that'll kind of let you know, in many ways, what is to come. All right? But it's definitely going to be just, I'll go. I don't have a lot of time. I'm a little bit crunched for time, guys, but because I was initially off today, but I actually am going to end up going into work. So let me just go back to the present moment and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of just a preview and just kind of going over some different astrological topics about the current energy, what's been going on, what can we kind of expect and stuff too. It's interesting that we won't get the Sun Jupiter conjunction this year. It's going to happen in Cancer, right? This Sun Uranus conjunction was a major disruptor, and it's been disrupting for the weeks leading up to it, right? Saturn is getting ready to come into Aries, which is a major shift, and it's going to be conjuncting Neptune. Although not exact, that's going to happen more next year, but we have a lot of planets that are at the end of their various signs, especially outer planets. Uranus coming towards the end of Taurus. We have Neptune that has already gone into Aries. We have Saturn that's going into Aries. We have Pluto that's now in Aquarius officially. So a lot of these outer planets are making major shifts, and of course this is going to have generational impact, because these larger planets, because they move much slower, they have more generational impacts, right? Like a lot of your peers are going to have a lot of your peers that are your same age, they're going to have the same Pluto sign. They're going to have the same Neptune sign. They're going to have the same Uranus sign. They probably will have the same Saturn sign, right? They're going to have these same signs. It doesn't really, and I think it's interesting too, because, a lot of times it'll be the same Jupiter sign, but it also depends. I think once you hit adulthood, it's a little bit different. You may have different Jupiter signs, but isn't it interesting that more than likely the people that you grew up with and went to school with, because since we do school, and Jupiter does rule school, and we do everything by grades, and grades are based off of your age. How like the people that you graduated with, we all were pretty much all the same age. We're pretty much all the same age. More than likely had the same Jupiter, because Jupiter spends 12 months in a sign, right? So more than likely you have the same Jupiter. Maybe, but there of course is some variance, but there's like a 90 to 95% chance you have the same Jupiter. And it's interesting how that works, because Jupiter rules school, right? So when it comes to these the transpersonal planets are Jupiter and Saturn, right? And then you have the outer planets, which are much longer. So of course these are going to have larger implications on larger swaths of the population, especially with so many shifts moving into new signs, right? Especially with a lot of them being at the beginning of the zodiac, with the exception of Pluto here in Aquarius, right? So it's my belief that we are kind of in the precursor to the age of Aquarius, but Pluto has to go all the way through Aquarius for it to really kick off. And then when Pluto goes into Pisces, it's really, in many ways, the destruction and the rebirth of all these other Piscean elements that we've been dealing with over the last 2,000 years. It's already happening, but we'll see it more so once Pluto reaches that spot. That's the topic for a whole nother video. So, but anyways, that's about all the time that I have. Hopefully this gave a little bit of insight into what's been going on. And I think we're in for an interesting ride. I think once the sun comes into Gemini, it's like, it's going to be interesting, because I think it can definitely help to break up the energy and bring some swift moving energy to things, because things have been probably feeling a little bit stuck in a sense, but things are finally like slowly like turning on. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's taken a while for us, like the 0 to 60 that we're so used to. It's taking a little bit to reach that top speed, but things are going to really start to pick up, especially once that's especially like I said, sun comes into Gemini in like tomorrow, and Saturn's going to come into Aries in a week, and then we'll see Jupiter come into Cancer in a few weeks. Things are about to start picking up. So it's going to be one of those things where it's like you have to be prepared. You got to be ready to move. You got to be ready to act. And just sitting around is waiting for an answer to come and waiting for the perfect moment to come, it's not really going to work. It's overthinking things. It's not really going to work. Trying to like overly prepare per se, it's not going to work. There has to be a level of risk and just being a little bit more bold right now. So, but that's what I have for you all. Y'all take care, stay blessed, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.